Hi, I like to record my stuff because I feel like I could probably get my stuff across better. But I have black circles under my eyes. I don't look the same anymore. I am so exhausted. Well, my daughter's safe. She's in a hospital now. And but just to give you some information on what I went through, it was ridiculous. Well, first time my daughter, she went missing for 21 days, and then I was looking for her. I was going out like at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning in Paterson looking for her, and then I had my husband find her, and then he called the cops. And then let me tell you something about calling the cops in Paterson. It is a very difficult process. I had to help. I was at work actually, and they do not know all the street names, so I had to kind of like guide them to see where they were, and they had to call my husband, and my husband had to tell them where they were. But my daughter was in a grocery store, and they had about 4 cops try to hold her down because she was so strong, and she was not in a good situation at all. She went to the hospital. I was still at work. I was leaving. My husband calls me and tells me, "Oh, you better get to the hospital because they're ready to discharge her." I said, "What do you mean discharge her? She just came to the hospital." When I went to the hospital 20 minutes later, they had her discharge papers ready, and I started screaming because I was like, "What do you mean you have her discharge papers ready? She's only been there for 20 minutes total. How could you already say that she's ready to leave?" There was no blood work done, no cardiology order, nothing. Everything was, she's just an addict, that's it. You know, whatever. They didn't even test her to see what she was on. So I made a big scene, and I started yelling, and I said, you know, how could this happen? And the nurse came to me, and she explained to me, you know, that they were gonna test her to see what's going on. My daughter, in the meantime, was not well. She wasn't mentally stable. She was all over the place. She was going back and forth, swinging her sweaters. She was doing everything. And then I overheard one of the nurses say, "Well, she's just going to do it again. She's just going to come back." And I overheard her, and I said, "No, she's not. She needs help. This is what happens when you need help." So anyway, went to the doctor and the hospital. I was going to ask him a question, but I already did a video on what he said to me. And he was just very rude. He had me thrown out to the front of the hospital. When I went to the front of the hospital, I waited, and then I called, and they said, and I called the crisis unit. I spoke to this woman, Sarah, in the crisis unit, and she says, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't tell you any information. She's 22 years old." So then she said, "Well, we're going to discharge her." And I said, "What do you mean going to discharge her? You didn't even take blood work. You did nothing. You don't know anything that's going on." But of course I believe that they did, because I actually got the discharge papers, and they did do all the blood work and everything for the drugs only. And so I said to her, "But she's not stable enough." So they said, "Well, sorry, ma'am, that's it. She's going to leave." And I asked for her last name. She didn't give me her last name. And then she hung up on me. So I said, "Well, and then I called the emergency room department, and I said, "Well, I'm going to wait outside. I'm not going to let my daughter leave until she comes home with me." And they said, "Well, ma'am, whatever, you know, you could do what you like." And then she hung up on me. So I waited. My daughter came out with this woman from Eva's Kitchen in Paterson. When my daughter came out, she looked absolutely horrible. She had her scrubs from the hospital. She had her, you know, when they put you, she had like something green on, like scrubs, you know. She had no shoes on. So she wasn't even mentally stable enough to put on her shoes. She had socks from the hospital. She was walking to the street like that, and I was screaming to my daughter. I was like, "Stop, Vicky, stop, please." She couldn't even hardly talk, I guess because she was screaming, and she just kept turning around, and then she started running. So then I started going after her. I started walking, and at that point I called the cops. And I tell the cops, "Look, my daughter just came out of St. Joseph's, but she's not mentally right. She almost got ran into a car. She's walking in between cars. She's running. She's all over the place. She's talking to herself." So as I was walking, the police officer says, "Okay, well, stay where you are because we need to find you." And I'm like, "How am I going to stay where I am? I need to follow her. I'm going to lose her." So I couldn't lose her, because if I lost her, that's it. I don't know where she would have went. Again, I'd be looking for her all over Paterson again. So there I was, looking for her, running around, going block to block, screaming at people, saying, "Where's my daughter? Where's my daughter?" Making a left, then making a right. I think I walked about 10, 15 blocks. Couldn't deal with it. I'm soaking wet, trying to get the cops. I see her at a park. She's changing in the park. She's changing into this black outfit. I don't even know where she got the black outfit from. I scream her name. She's running. Now I'm running across the grass, trying to catch up with her. Then I lose her. Then I'm asking everybody like a crazy person, did you see this girl? Did you see this young lady? In the meantime, the cops are talking to me. "Well, so you need to stay where you are." And I'm like, "I can't. You have to hurry, because I'm going to lose her." Finally, I flag down the cop. I'm like, "Look, she's going down this way." So I asked somebody, and they go, "No, she went down, she made a right." So then I'm trying to get the cop to turn around. I don't know where the cop is, and I see the ambulance. So now the ambulance, I'm telling them, "Please go that way. My daughter's that way." Finally, I see my daughter, and I see the cop. Then the cop is telling other people to grab her. I'm like, "What are you doing? Just run. This is what you're trained for." In my head, I'm thinking, just run after her. So he gets back in his car. He tells the people, "Look, if she comes back here again, grab her." And I'm thinking in my head, why are they going to grab her? She doesn't want anybody touching her, except the cop. Obviously the cop, that's the cop's job to touch her. So anyway, so he turns around, he finally gets her, and then my daughter's not good at this point. She's trying to kick because, she's not stable. She starts screaming. The cops grab her. The cops have to put her on the ambulance. Then the cop comes back to me, yells at me, says, "You need to stay back because she hears your voice and you're making her crazy." So, it was horrible. Anyway, I go back in with the cop. He drops me off in the ER, and I'm just sweating. I'm exhausted. So I go back to the ER, and I'm like, "I told you my daughter was going to end up back. I told you she wasn't well." And this woman, Sarah, the clinician, said she was okay to come out. And look, she's not okay. And look what happened. So hours later, I go back home. I take a shower, and then a few hours later, I call him like, "Look, do you need me down there? Because, if you need me down there," it's like, "No, where she is, she can't have visitors." So in the back of my mind, I'm spending all my night thinking, is she going to get discharged? Is she going to end up in the street again? Do I have to go to Paterson? Oh my God. So I call the crisis unit again in St. Joseph's, and they're like, "Well, we're sorry. Due to HIPAA rules, we can't tell you whether or not she's going to get discharged or get transferred." So I'm like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. How am I going to go to sleep? Am I going to have to look for her again? Because I'm not talking about this is not a normal situation. This is not where, she's an addict and she knows what she's doing, She's an addict, but she also has other mental issues going on. So it's very difficult for me to sleep knowing that it's really not her fault. It's not their fault to begin with. It's a disease. It's a disease that doesn't make you think right. So especially with an underlying illness, it's going to make you even think worse. So I was back and forth. I was just all over the place. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. They did not make it easy for me. I begged them. I said, "Look, I want to sleep tonight. I want to be in peace for the weekend." Didn't tell me. They said, "Sorry, this is it. We can't force her. We can't tell you." I just said, "Can you just at least tell me if she's in the hospital or out? Because if she's out, then I'll just go back to Paterson and make sure she's okay." Nothing. So finally, by the grace of God, I got a call on today, or yesterday actually, and she's in the hospital. She's safe. So thank God for that. But that is just what I had to go through at St. Joseph's Hospital. They really have to change the system for young adults who are mentally ill with a substance issue. They can't say that a person is capable of making decisions when they have repetitive habitual behavior that is a danger to themselves, and when they have a history of being a danger to themselves. You can't say, well, that person has rights. Yes, they have rights, but they don't have rights to kill themselves. They don't have that right to make that decision whether or not to leave. And as a clinician, you should make that choice and thoroughly do your work from A to Z to make sure that that person doesn't end up back in the hospital, and to make sure that that person is okay to go out into society, which clearly my daughter was not okay to go back into society. But of course, you know who you are. You made that decision to do that, which could have led her to have a car hit her or worse. So thank God for God and Jesus, and thank you for watching my daughter. And that's what I like to say.